Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Today I'm going to be doing my October reading wrap-up. And so overall in this month of October I read 9 books, which I was a little surprised by because my month started out a little bit slow, but then it ended up turning around. And let me see, I did a little quantification of what types of books I actually read over this past month. So in total I read 1 romance, 6 kind of general fiction / literary fiction books, as well as 1 fantasy and 1 thriller. And so with me today I have 4 physical copies of books, and then I'm missing a few of the other books because I either listened to them as an audiobook or I already had to return them to the library. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get into my reviews. Okay, so the first book that I read this month, I actually have the copy of here because I have not had to return it yet, and that is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. And this is one that I heard a lot of different people recommending, and so while normally I don't really read a lot of young adult romance, I decided to give it a try. And this one is about Liz. She is in high school, and there is a boy that has recently come back into town that she used to know when she was younger, and she thinks he is so hot and so amazing and wants him to be her boyfriend, and so she's determined to somehow achieve that. And then she has her enemy who lives next door. His name is Wes. He also goes to her high school, and she kind of works out a little deal with him, even though she says she hates him, to get him to help her get her dream man, and it goes from there. I think you can kind of predict what might happen there. So yeah, definitely a very, very predictable book overall. But I do think it was well done, as much as it was a little bit cringy sometimes. I felt like I still enjoyed it, and I didn't really regret reading it. I think at the time I gave it 3.5 stars. Looking back on it now, maybe it's closer to a 3-star. Just a very mid-range, nice, lighter book if you need a quick read within some other slower reads. Okay, and then the next book that I read this month was Remarkably Bright Creatures. This is one that had been recommended to me by several different people, and I finally got the audio book from the library this past month. And this was a really cute book. It is partially from the point of view of an octopus. So it takes place, a lot of it, in an aquarium where this octopus lives, and he's just kind of narrating his life while he also interferes with the life of a few other characters. So you're kind of hearing, I think it's either 3 or 4 different points of view that you're hearing alongside the octopus, and you're kind of slowly learning how all of their lives kind of intersect. But overall, a very sweet and very well written book, and I gave this one 4.5 stars, so I would definitely recommend this book. Definitely one of my favorite books of the month. And then the next book that I read was A Little Life, and this one I already had to return to the library. This book, how to even describe it, this one was a very, very deep, dark book. It's covering the lives, or following the lives, of these 4 boys who meet in college, and then really just covers the rest of their lives from then on. It's primarily focused on one of them and kind of just all the experiences he goes through. He has had this very traumatic past, but you don't exactly know why it was so traumatic because he will not talk to anyone about it. But you can tell he's been through an incredible amount in the past, which has given him a lot of struggles in the future, and he relies heavily on his friendships with the 3 other boys that he met in college to really get through his life, especially one of them that he becomes very, very close to. So yeah, it's one of those books where they're just kind of covering years and years of their life, all of the excitements and disappointments that come with life, some really, really like horrible struggles that this one main character as well as the other have to go through. And I would definitely say if you are interested in reading it, there are a million trigger warnings that I would just look up before starting it, with physical and mental abuse and depression and suicide and everything like that. Pretty much anything you can think of does get covered in this book. So this was a book that took me a really long time to get through, and I actually thought I was not going to get through that many books this month because I spent so long reading this one, because it was a very long book. In addition to that, it was not at all a light book, so it just took a long time to get through. But I overall would really recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. I think it was incredibly well written and touched on a lot of very important points and was just very realistic in my opinion of not always being, you know, this beautiful uplifting book, but just life can be hard, and if you've had trauma in the past, then you're probably not just going to get over that quickly. So it was really interesting and really well written, but a very, very sad, depressing book, so don't read it if you're feeling too down. Yeah, so then moving on from that book, the next one that I read was The Art of Racing in the Rain, and this one I actually do have my own copy of. This one is actually narrated from the point of view of a dog, so I guess I have a couple books this month that were just not narrated by humans. And so this one, it kind of starts at the beginning with the dog getting pretty old. You can tell that he's close to the end of his life, and then he kind of just reflects over his entire life and just all of his memories with his human and his family, and his owner is a race car driver, and so he has always had these dreams of driving cars because he also always watched all of these documentaries and races with his dad, who is his human dad. And so it's just a really great read, and it is definitely sad at points, as you can imagine, just going through an entire dog's life. But it's also very sweet, especially if you yourself own a dog. Obviously this dog is written much more intelligently than a dog could actually be, as far as we know. Dogs cannot write books, but it's still just funny to hear the little thoughts that they have going through the dog's head and kind of think about, you know, is that something that my dog thinks about? Yeah, it was just a very enjoyable and very, very fast read. So I would definitely recommend this book. I gave it, let's see, 4.5 stars as well. I think the only reason it wasn't a 5 is because since it was such a short, fast read, you didn't get maybe as connected as you could have, but it was still incredibly good and funny at times. So I really liked this one. And then the next book that I read in October was 1984 by George Orwell. And I'm sure many of you have heard of or read this book before in school. I read this one because I couldn't really remember if I had read it in school. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I didn't, but since I've heard so many people talk about having read it in the past, I decided to give it a try, especially since it's kind of one of those dystopian alternate universe, alternate reality kind of book. So I was kind of just interested to see what it was like, since I had never read it, or at least couldn't remember reading it. And so I gave this one a try. I already had to return it to the library, so I don't have it with me. But if you don't know, this is about kind of like this dystopian world taking place in 1984, where the characters don't really have any ownership to their life. Their life is completely controlled. They're watched by basically Big Brother at all points of their life. They just have to go to work, come home. At home they're being watched by Big Brother. They can't do anything without being worried about it being reported. Like, children are trained to report anything suspicious, so you're kind of in this constant state of fear that you are being watched and you cannot do anything that could upset the government, and if you do, then you likely just disappear. So very, very different world than we're in today, but I definitely think there's a lot of parallels that have been drawn to, you know, it's still useful to learn from, with us having our computers and phones and everything. Like, in some ways we are being watched very, very often, obviously to not to this extreme of the government completely controlling us, but it's still, I think, useful to read about, and that is why I wanted to read this book to begin with. However, this book is also very, very weird. It just, in the way that it's written, it's not, if you don't read a lot, I would not just like pick this book up and then if you don't like it, be like, I just don't like reading it. No, it's just the way this book is written, it's so hard to get through. For me at least, I almost just decided to not finish the book when I was about a third of the way into it, because I was just like so not attached to the main character, because the way they write him, it's just so confusing about what's happening and you don't really care about him much at all. But I ended up getting a little bit more into it about half of the way through. It starts to actually pick up a little bit more, but I still ended up just giving it 2.5 stars. I think I'm maybe just not, I know some people are like extremely into all of the like very maybe more old literary fiction and all the deeper meanings of all of this that you could glean from it, which I'm sure it could lead to a lot of interesting discussions, but for me personally, I wouldn't really say I enjoyed reading it, which is why I give it the 2.5 stars. I still at least finished it. I got a little more into it at the end, but I wouldn't really recommend necessarily. I think it could be skipped. Hot take on that one. The next book that I read was Never Lie. I'm pretty sure this was by Frida McFadden, and I had read one of her books before, or several of her books before, I guess. I read The Housemaid, I think. There's like a 2-book series. I'll put the title here when I look up what it's actually called. And I really enjoyed those books. I thought they were well-written thrillers. Then I also actually have it here, The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. And this one I did not at all enjoy. I thought it was the most predictable and nonsensical book ever. But so I decided to, kind of give this one a try and just see what it was like. And I listened to the audiobook of this one and I actually really, really enjoyed it. And so this one takes place, it starts out, a husband and wife have just arrived at this house in the middle of the woods that they're interested in viewing because they think they might want to buy it. And right after they arrive, they're kind of waiting for the real estate agent to arrive and look at it with them. And it starts to snow very, very heavily, and they kind of end up getting trapped in this home for a couple nights. And they kind of slowly come to realize that this house was actually owned previously by this very, very well-known therapist who also was an author, and she would have clients that had very, very severe issues. And the wife is kind of slowly getting a little bit creeped out by this home because it is known that that therapist had ended up disappearing and it was assumed that she had been murdered. And so it's kind of just a creepy home. More and more creepy things are starting to happen, and you're kind of trying to figure out how all of this is connecting. A few weird things are starting to happen in the house. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I listened to it as an audiobook and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think it was a really good thriller, had some good twists that actually seemed logical, and that you could somewhat predict, but not necessarily. And so, yeah, I would definitely recommend this as a good, fast, light thriller. Definitely enjoyed that one. And then the next book that I read this month was actually a fantasy, and that is Throne of Glass. So it's been a very big fantasy series if you have not heard of it. I've heard a lot of people talk about it in the past, but normally I don't really like to read fantasy. But this is one of those series that I heard enough people talk about that I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And it's by the same author as the person who wrote the Court of Thorn and Roses series, which I did read, I think, the first 3 books of, and I enjoyed it overall, but then I just got to be a little too much and I decided to stop. And those are very long books, so I couldn't really keep track of all of the details there. And so I decided to try this series as well because I'd heard some people say they liked it even better than A Court of Thorns and Roses. This one is kind of this, fantasy world where magic has been outlawed, and there are several different people competing to become the king's assassin, and one of them is the main character that we are following. She has previously worked as an assassin, and but has since been enslaved, and so she's kind of getting this opportunity to now become the king's assassin and escape her enslavement and eventually earn freedom through doing this. And I won't go into too many details because, again, it's a fantasy, so I feel like there's way too much to describe there. But I think part of the reason I ended up actually enjoying this more than I thought I would is because the magic was outlawed, so there wasn't much of a magic element necessarily. It kind of reminded me of Hunger Games, honestly, because there were several different assassins that were all having to go through different battles to kind of battle it out to be the king's assassin. They all had trainers, so it really did kind of remind me of Hunger Games. And overall, I did enjoy it. I think I will give the rest of the series, or at least the next couple books, a try and see what I think, and I'll let you know. Okay, and then the next book I have is The 5-Star Weekend. This is another Elin Hilderbrand book, so I've read several of her books in the past and overall enjoyed pretty much all of them, and so I decided to give this one a try. This one is about a character, what's her name? Hollis, and she has this very picture-perfect life from the outside, and then her husband dies from a car crash in the beginning, and so her life is very uprooted, very changed, and it's now been, I think, like 6 months or something since her husband's death, and she decides, I really just need to do something to turn my life around and to get myself remotivated, and so she decides to throw what she is calling, and what I guess someone else had invented in the past, a 5-star weekend. And so this 5-star weekend is basically her inviting a friend from each of the like 5 stages, or I guess 4 stages of her life. So like she has a friend there from like growing up as a child, a friend from college, a friend from when she first became a mother, and then a friend from more recent in her life. And they're all meeting up on Nantucket in Hollis's like Nantucket beach home to just spend a weekend together. And these people, most of them from her past life, have not necessarily met each other since they're from very like isolated parts of her life. So this is the first time that they're kind of all together, all interacting. And of course there is a bit of drama, a bit of mystery to ensue with that. So overall I gave this one 3.5 stars. I felt like it was good overall. I enjoyed it. I wasn't wowed by it, but I thought it was overall good. You did want to keep reading to kind of find out what happened, since there are a little bit of mysteries that start to arise, but nothing amazing, but it was good. I think it's a good like beach read for sure. Maybe not like a nice October read. I felt like it was a little bit out of place, but I overall enjoyed it. Okay, and then the last book that I read this month was To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm sure most of you have either read this book in school or heard about it before, so I won't go into a synopsis of this book, but I had read it growing up, and then I believe read it in high school for school, and I really enjoyed it. And so I saw it in a library book sale for 50 cents, and so I decided to just grab it so I would have my own copy, and just reread it at the end of the month. And I still really loved it. It was fun to reread it because there were so many things that I had forgotten about that happened in this book, or points that I thought were like the entirety of the book that ended up just being a smaller section. So yeah, it was really enjoyable to read this again, and I gave it 5 stars, as I had in the past. Would definitely recommend, if you never got around to reading this in school, giving this a read. I just read it in about 2 days. It's a pretty short, small book, but really good. Yeah, that is the 9 books that I read over this month. I had a lot of really good books this month, a couple that I didn't love so much, but it was still overall a very enjoyable reading month, and I got to a lot of books that I've really been wanting to read for a while, which I am very glad about. So yeah, definitely make sure to comment down below if you've read some of these books before, what your thoughts were, what your reviews were, or if you have any recommendations based off the reviews that I've given in this video, please let me know. I'm always down for some more book recommendations. But yeah, I'm hoping to put up another video in the next couple weeks before my November wrap up. But yeah, let me know if you have any other suggestions for videos I could do as well. I would love to hear them in the comments. And in the meantime, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.